Welcome to the Jewish Roots portion of Faith for Today. This is Pastor Donna Long. Yes. We're so glad that you stayed tuned to join us for this celebration together of what the Jewish roots are of Christianity. You know, in the book of Romans, Paul tells us as Gentiles that we have been grafted into, yes. We've become part of what God was doing through his people, the Jews. In fact, he says that we do not support the root, but the root supports us. And there is a growing movement in the body of Christ around the world as Christians are discovering the Torah, discovering the richness of the Old Testament, discovering really there are things there that were meant for our blessing. And one of them is the celebration of Shabbat, of yes. Sabbath. God said that Sabbath is a commandment of his. It began in Genesis in the creation story. 6 days he labored, the seventh day he rested. We talked about the fact that in the millennium, through that 1,000 years, that Sabbath will continue to be observed. Yes. We've talked about the fact that Constantine came in and brought in another day, mm-hmm. and in fact it was the church of the era of Constantine that said, we don't want to have anything to do with our Jewish roots, we don't want to celebrate these things, and yet they're life-giving.
That's right.
Sabbath is very important in God's economy. It is a dimension of rest. It is a moed. It is a space he created, mm-hmm. and if we get into his space, great things happen within our life.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so we talked about how on to introduce Sabbath, which begins on Friday night, because God measures time differently than we do.
Yes, he does.
And he doesn't go from midnight to midnight. God's day starts from sundown and goes to the next sundown. So Sabbath, which is Saturday, the seventh day, actually begins when the sun goes down on Friday. And that in Jewish homes, and now and increasingly in many Christian homes, that's right. That is a time when the Sabbath candles are lit, when the table has been spread with fine linen, with a special tablecloth, and right. you've got your nice china out, and you dress up.
That's right. Usually you're not eating just TV dinners.
Right, it's not TV dinners. There's a special meal. You're treating it as if an honored guest is coming to dinner.
That's right.
And there's great anticipation for that. And it begins with the lighting of the Sabbath candles.
Yes.
And the last 2 weeks we lit those candles and sang the blessing that we use in our home and that our church uses whenever we gather together.
Yes.
And in case you've missed that or you want to pick up on it again, yes. we're going to start this particular broadcast once again by lighting the Sabbath candles.
Yes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu bo mitzvotav Vitzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbos Kodesh. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments, and in whose honor we kindle the light of the holy Shabbat.
And that separates, that marks the end of the work week, the 6 days
that which is common.
God said it's common, it's ordinary, it's our time to work and labor.
That's right.
And it introduces us into his dimension called Sabbath, a dimension of rest. It's not just a day, it's a time.
Yes, it is. It's a place.
It's a place.
It's really a place.
Sabbath is a place you go to.
That's right, that you enter into.
And it's not like, well, I go to it by going to a special building.
No.
I go to it into a dimension of time and space that God has created to totally refresh us.
That's right.
Sabbath is meant to be a time of a deep spiritual refreshment that goes for 24 hours in which we're rejuvenated spiritually, we're rejuvenated in our soul.
That's right.
We're rejuvenated physically.
That's right.
So that then when we enter into the first day of the week and go through the next days, that we have a different perspective.
We come out as the head and not the tail.
That's right.
Above only and not beneath.
And we were sharing some of the joy that we found. Our congregation began to experience that as we began to honor God's Word, as we began to honor the Bible, and say, God, it's not about when we worship you. You can worship anytime you want, but it is about honoring Sabbath.
That's right.
That
because it's His command.
As a congregation, as we made a move and we said, okay, we're going to honor Sabbath, and in fact, we're going to choose to worship on Sabbath, but we're going to start that on Friday. that we all began to experience this anticipation
That's right.
building up during the day Friday, looking forward
That's right.
to the beginning of Sabbath, the lighting of the candles.
That's right.
Let's talk about that anticipation. What can you describe it?
You know, the anticipation is like, I don't think it's like anything that we can compare. There's nothing in this natural realm that we can say, well, we can give ideas of it, but I don't think we can ever quite capture it, because it's actually an anticipation of something that's very supernatural. And if you're anticipating, you know, a party or an event or something in this natural realm of things, you know, you can say, well, I have a joy about it. I have an anticipation. I mean, I get excited just thinking about it. But we're finding that with Shabbat, it's something of a whole new dimension. It's of a higher level than anything the world has to offer. I know we personally, we have nothing that we can compare in our lives that could give us such a high joy as the thought of we are now leaving this behind, the work week, the mundane, the common, and we are now entering into, and we said, you know, Shabbat is a place. I think that it's even more than a place. It's a person. It's a presence. It's not really a place. And I think as we're delving deeper and deeper into it, because we're following our leading of Holy Spirit into it, He's leading us deeper and deeper, and He's opening our eyes wider and wider, so that we're beginning to embrace more and more of the life force that lies within Shabbat. And I think it is. I think it's His divine presence. It's His manifest presence rests within there, much as it did in the temple. You know what I mean? It's like He stuck it in this day, and if we'll just come into this day with a heart desire, He'll elevate us to a position that nothing in the world can ever give us.
You know, it's interesting, among the Jewish people, they'll refer often to the Sabbath queen. They'll refer to Sabbath in an aspect of a feminine personality. And when you talk about that Sabbath is not just a place, it's not just a time, but there's a personality about it.
Yes.
There's a presence to Sabbath. It's kind of like that view of Sabbath queen was God in His fullness. I mean, God reveals Himself as Father, as King.
Yep.
But, you know, He encompasses all of feminine and masculine together.
That's right, He does.
And so the Jews had a real hold, I believe, that Abba, Avinu, our Father in heaven, Avinu,
right.
Hashemayim, our Father in heaven has this day, and that if we look to Him with the masculine qualities, we look to the day with all the nurturing,
That's right.
feminine qualities.
That's right.
You step into a space. It's kind of like if you were to return home and you haven't been there in years, your family's separated and you go back to the old homestead or something. It's the building itself as a place.
That's right.
And there's a certain atmosphere about the building. But the building without the people.
Without the people is empty, really.
It's empty. And it's the people that make it.
That's right.
And I remember even in my 40s, my parents retired and they lived down in Florida. And on into my 40s, you know, that I would show up at their home in Sarasota. And once a year I'd go down and I'd open the front door and I'd call out, Mom, I'm home.
That's right.
Well, I've got my own family. I've got my own life. You know, what does that mean? But that Mom was home. And
it was the presence.
It was the presence.
It was a presence. It was her presence
That's
there.
right. And I could go down to Florida to that house now, and other people now own that house, and I could knock on their door and say, you know, I used to live here, can we see it? And I'd look around, and there'd be things familiar and things change, and I would say, oh, isn't that nice? Yeah, I see what you did there, and thanks for letting me have these memories. But what would be missing is the presence.
Presence. That's right.
So Sabbath is a presence.
Yes, it is.
And it's not like, oh, Sunday we go to church. You get up, you rush, you go to church. You sing some hymns, you listen to a message, you go to Mass, whatever.
That's right.
And then
you can't wait until it's over so that you can get out, because you're
and
thinking of what you're going to do after you leave.
That's right. that what God has embodied in Sabbath is an entirely different thing. And so when at times when you explain to people we celebrate Sabbath, people try to take what their experience of Sunday is and say, well, you just do that on Saturday.
And it's
that's not it at
nothing
all.
like that at all.
Right.
It's nothing like that. I don't think that anyone could ever reproduce if your heart is in the right place with Abba. I don't believe you could ever take what happens on Shabbat, on Sabbath, and reproduce it in any other day of the week. You just cannot, because it says that he took this day and he spoke a blessing into this day.
That's right.
And that blessing, what he spoke, is still resounding. It's eternal, so it's still resounding in that day. And as we step into it, we are stepping into what he has released into the day.
You know, I think we understand the atmosphere in a place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can go into a place and it's holy.
That's right.
You can, if you step into our sanctuary, for example.
That's right.
And people have commented all the time that there is a sense of presence
That's right.
in our sanctuary, and because of the worship that we have, because of the portal of
Because we guard it.
Because we guard it. We don't
atmosphere.
do secular things in it.
That's
We
right.
guard that atmosphere, so you can step into the atmosphere here on Bautel Street
That's right.
and into that sanctuary, and you know you're in the presence of something.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
That's the presence of a place.
That's right.
Sabbath is the presence of a time.
That's right. Yes, it is.
That when God talks about moeds, he talks about seasons
Yes.
in which there is a presence.
Yes.
And in that time space, there is a presence. I think of how most people celebrate Christmas, and that's a whole other story. But
Yes.
but there is a presence to those holidays. And people go in the stores, and people are going around, and the music's playing, and there can be just an entirely different atmosphere. I've seen workplaces transform during that season.
That's
People are friendlier. People tend not to get upset with each other as much. There's like a spirit of the season.
Yep.
You could go into July and bring out all your decorations and decorate it up, but it wouldn't be there because it's in the season.
No, that's right.
Sabbath is a time space in which there is a presence of God.
That's right.
And it begins at sundown
That's right.
on Friday night, and it ends on sundown on Saturday night. And during that time, when you say God sanctified it,
That's right.
what God spoke is,
That's right.
my presence is in that time space,
That's right.
just as surely as my presence is in this holy place.
That's right. That's right.
Now, the presence of God in the temple, the presence of God in the tabernacle, the presence of God in a place, he's in that place.
That's right.
You can walk 5 doors down
That's right.
from our church, and you can walk into the bar.
That's right.
And that presence isn't there.
That's right.
There is another
right.
presence there.
Yes, but we don't want.
That
part of that
presence isn't there.
That's right.
Okay? So in the same way, you can enter any other time space. God's there. I mean, God is down.
God is everywhere.
God's
That's
everywhere.
right.
He's in
That's
the
right.
bar, but that
He
presence isn't there.
That's right.
You can enter into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. God is there. Jesus said, "I'll never leave you or forsake you."
That's
Yeshua
right.
promised He would always be there with you. You can fellowship with Him. You can walk with Him. You can be with Him in all those other time spaces. But it's the Sabbath time space where God sanctified it.
Yes, he did.
And
Yes,
isn't
he
it
did.
interesting that those who persecuted the Jews, the first thing they wanted to ban was the celebration of Sabbath. That
right.
the church fathers, early after Constantine, wanted to get rid of
Change
the
that day.
Sabbath. In fact, on up until 500 AD, amazingly, every time they had an edict, they had to keep saying, if you're a priest and you're observing Sabbath, we're going to kick you out of the church.
That's right.
On up to 500 AD. Why? Because they couldn't stop this practice.
That's right.
Why? Because those Christians, early Christians, found out, no, this space
This time
is
space,
different.
Yep,
There's a
that's right.
time
There's
space there
something about it.
where God's in it.
It's a supernatural presence. It's a supernatural life in that day.
And it's really difficult to explain it because everything we use is an analogy, but falls somewhat short of
Right.
it.
Well, it seems like such an ethereal type concept to grasp, but we know that it's true, because what has happened is things have been transformed as we've come more and more into an understanding of Sabbath. I believe that what we found is that as we go through our week, We're not, because you had made a comment in one of our broadcasts that, you know, before we used to celebrate Shabbat, that, you know, you would come into it and it's like, oh my goodness, you'd be exhausted by the end of the week, and oh my goodness, thank goodness it's Friday just to get out of here and crash and all that. But as we began understanding about it, it's still the same busy, busy day, busy week and all that. But we're not finding that as we come into and we're approaching Shabbat, that we are as exhausted as we used to be. Doesn't mean that our schedule isn't as busy as, but there's something that is imparted into us in Shabbat that we carry as a life force in us as we go through the week, that it's almost self-renewing.
Yes.
And then it's like getting to the next Shabbat, and it's not like we're just laying out there, we're just so exhausted, it's like, oh, hurry up and fill me. It's like, no, we get into it, and it's like, wow, we get this life that's already here. It's almost like getting it into an even higher state.
That's right. And that's so true.
It's a transformation. It's just a total transformation.
It's another dimension.
It is.
And you know that you're going to step in that dimension, and it's like literally things fall off of you.
If you honor Shabbat and enter into His day as He says, it transforms all your other days and brings them to a higher level. That
absolutely does.
You know, it's something that it imparts into every one of your other days. You look at everything differently.
So then giving up Sabbath.
Oh my goodness! Why would you ever be so foolish?
Why would you want to do that?
Yes.
I'm saying, well, I know, you know, God's not a legalist, and He's not.
Oh, He's not.
And it's not like, you know, I really need to be doing other things on this Saturday. I got to go to the store. I got to do this or got to do that. You know, it's not that God is a legalist. It's that I have missed the filling station.
Right. That's right.
I've missed that.
It's like it says, when you've robbed me. Well, rob me what? Rob me of the opportunity to bless you. That's right. And this is what He wants. He knows we need that day. He didn't make Shabbat for us, for Himself rather. He made it for us.